I have watched a human girl walk out of a burning transport with her arm hanging wrong, and her eyes flat as still water. I have also watched that same girl freeze in a doorway, because someone had laughed on the other side of it. I am telling you both of these things at once because I did not understand for a long time that they were the same story. My people call this kind of understanding a late arrival. It means the truth was standing beside you the whole while, and you only turned to look at it after it had stopped being useful. We are a slow species. We arrive late to almost everything except grief. My name is Osel. I am Vesin. If you have never met one of us, imagine something tall and unhurried, gray as riverstone, with two sets of eyelids and a habit of pausing before every sentence as though checking whether the world still wants us to speak. We do not raise our voices. We are not built for conflict. We came to the colony at Faro because the humans needed teachers of atmosphere work, and we needed to be somewhere that our quietness would not be mistaken for weakness. That is the part I got wrong in the beginning. I thought I understood weakness. I thought I understood which of us was fragile. Let me tell you about the girl. Faro is not a beautiful place. I want to say that first so you do not picture something it isn't. It is a frontier settlement on the dry side of a world called Marrow's Hold, and it sits under a shield dome the color of a bruise about to heal. All day the dome hums. You stop hearing it after the first week. Then some night it changes pitch by a fraction, and you sit up in your sleeping hollow with your hearts going fast, and you realize you had been listening to it every single second without knowing. The dust gets into everything, into the food, into the seams of the buildings, into the small joints of the machines. The maintenance drones that crawl the dome struts each dawn look like beetles that have given up on being alive. There is one main street, and it is not paved so much as compacted by feet and skids, and the wheels of the ore haulers that come down from the ridge mines every third day. And there is the school. Faro Combined School is one long low building with walls that were poured, not built, and a roof that ticks in the afternoon heat like something impatient. Combined because everyone goes there. Human colonist children and the few Vesin like me, and a scatter of Thren and one small Dulari girl whose family ran a repair shop and who never spoke above a whisper. Combined, because on a world this small you cannot afford to sort your children by species. There are not enough of any kind. I taught atmosphere work to the older students 3 afternoons a cycle. The rest of the time I sat at the back of the general classes, because the colony administrator had asked the Vesin adults to integrate, which is a human word that means be seen so they get used to you. So I was seen. I sat in the back with my knees folded up wrong for human furniture and I watched. That is how I first saw her come back. Her name was Della Voss. 16 human years, which on Marrow's Hold is old enough to work a shift and young enough to still be made to sit in a classroom and pretend to care about orbital mechanics. Before, I had barely noticed her. That is an honest thing to admit. She had been one of the quiet middle ones, the students who are neither loved nor mocked, who move through the day like water finding the lowest path. Brown hair she cut herself, you could tell. A jacket 2 sizes too big that had belonged to someone. She sat near the window. She drew in the margins of her work slate when the teacher wasn't looking. Small things. Machines, mostly. Engines cut open so you could see the parts. Then for 11 days she was gone, and the whole settlement knew why, and when she came back the whole settlement pretended it didn't. You will have heard the word skirmish and thought of something small, a word chosen by someone far away who wanted the thing to sound survivable. Here is what a skirmish is when you are close to it. The ore convoy from the ridge had gone out with 3 haulers and an escort skiff. Della's mother drove the second hauler. Della had gone along because it was a rest cycle, and because 16-year-olds who are bored will take any excuse to be somewhere that isn't a classroom, even a dusty road to a mine. They were 4 hours out when the raiders came down. I will not pretend to know what species they were. The colony report said Kryn, but the colony reports say crin for anything that comes out of the deep black without a registration beacon and takes what it wants. What matters is that they came in 2 clawed cutters, and they wanted the ore, and the escort skiff was 1 skiff, and the humans on the ground were miners and drivers and 1 girl who drew engines in the margins. The fight lasted, by the recovered logs, 11 minutes. 11 minutes. My people would call that not even a proper argument. But I have learned that human time and human violence do not use the same measure the rest of the galaxy uses. 11 minutes is enough. 11 minutes is a whole life if it is the right 11 minutes. The escort pilot died in the first 2. The lead hauler burned. The raiders were driving the survivors toward the second hauler to load them. You do not waste labor you can sell. When Della's mother did the thing that the colony would tell each other about for a year afterward in low voices, and that Della would never once speak of at all. She drove the hauler into the nearest cutter. Full mass, full speed. She put 40 tons of ore and steel into a raider cutter that had come down expecting no resistance from a work convoy, and she did not survive it, and neither did most of them. And in the confusion of that, the miners scattered into the rocks, and the second raider ship, its partner burning, its numbers halved, its easy prize turned into a wreck, decided the ore was no longer worth the price and left. That is the skirmish. That is the 11 minutes. When the relief flight reached them, they found 9 survivors in the rocks. One of them was a 16-year-old girl with a fractured arm and burns across one side of her neck, and no expression on her face at all, sitting with the Dulari repair shop mechanic's spare coat around her shoulders because someone had thought to give her one, holding a piece of her mother's hauler in her lap. A gauge, they said. A pressure gauge, snapped off the console. She had picked it up out of the wreck and she would not put it down, and no one had the heart to make her. She held it the whole flight home. She was still holding it, in her jacket pocket, the day she walked back into Faro Combined School. I know because I saw her hand close around it in her pocket the instant she stepped through the door, the way you might grip a railing on a ship that has started, very slightly, to list. Here is the thing I want you to understand before I tell you the rest. The people who mean well are sometimes the ones who do the most damage, not out of cruelty, out of not knowing what to do with a wound they can see but cannot touch. The morning Della came back, the teacher, a good human named Instructor Barrow, heavy and kind and out of his depth, stood at the front of the room and said, "We're all glad to have Della back with us." And everyone turned to look at her. I felt her want to disappear. I do not have a human's face reading, but even I could see it. A whole room of eyes turning at once, and every one of them full of the wrong thing: pity, curiosity, the specific ugly hunger some people have to be near a terrible event without paying its price. Someone in the back row whispered, and someone else shushed them, and the shushing was louder than the whisper, and everyone knew what it had been about. Della sat down at her old place by the window. She put her slate on the desk. She took out her stylus. And she began to draw an engine in the margin, cut open so you could see the parts, exactly as she had before, as though 11 minutes had not happened, as though she had not driven home 11 days ago holding a dead machine like a living thing. I thought at the time, I am ashamed of this now, I thought, she is fine. I thought human children were resilient in the way the reports said, tough little animals that bounced. I thought the drawing meant the wound had closed. I was arriving late. The truth was standing right beside me. Her hand was shaking so hard the engine came out crooked, and she pressed harder to hide it, and the stylus tore the slate's surface, and she kept drawing anyway over the tear, because the alternative to drawing was to look up, and looking up meant the room. That was the first day. The days after were worse, and none of it was the war. Let me tell you about Cora Merrill, because you cannot understand what happened without her, and because I have thought a great deal, in the cycles since, about the specific machinery of a certain kind of human cruelty. Cora was 17. She was the daughter of the assay office manager, which on Merrill's hold is close to being the daughter of a king. Her clothes were clean and had been bought, not made or handed down. She was clever in the way that is only ever pointed downward, never up clever enough to find the exact soft place in another person and press it, never clever enough to wonder why she wanted to. She had a small court, 3 or 4 others who orbited her and laughed a beat after she laughed and looked where she looked. My people do not have this. We do not gather behind a stronger one to feel strong. I watched it that year the way a person watches weather on a world they've never lived on, with interest, with a growing unease. Cora had decided, some time before the skirmish, that Della Voss was beneath her notice. Della was poor. Della cut her own hair. Della's mother drove a hauler and her father was gone somewhere off-world and did not come back, and all of this made Della, in Cora's arithmetic, a thing to be stepped over. But now Della was famous. That was the problem. That was the exact grain of sand that started the whole thing grinding. For 11 days the entire settlement had spoken of Della Voss, of her mother's sacrifice, of the girl who came home holding the gauge. There is a kind of person who cannot bear for the light to fall on someone they've decided is smaller than them. It offends them at a level below thought. Cora did not hate Della for surviving. Cora hated Della for mattering. So she went to work. It started small, the way these things do. It started with a folded note. I need you to understand what a folded note is in a human school, because when I first saw one I did not understand and I nearly did nothing. And doing nothing would have been a betrayal I would have carried a long time. The note traveled hand to hand across the room during Instructor Barrow's orbital mechanics lecture, each student passing it on with a small suppressed reaction, a smirk, a widening of the eyes, a hand over the mouth. It moved like a current toward the window, toward Della. The girl beside her put it on her desk. Della looked at it for a moment, then she unfolded it. I was too far to read it. I have never learned what it said exactly. But I watched Della Voss, who had sat in a wreck holding a dead machine, who had survived 11 minutes that killed her mother, who had not flinched at the whole room turning to stare. I watched her read 4 or 5 human words on a scrap of slate film and go completely, perfectly still. Not the stillness of calm. I knew the difference by then. This was the stillness of a creature that has learned that stillness is the only safety left. The stillness of the rocks after the 11 minutes. Her hand went into her jacket pocket, closed around the gauge. And on the other side of the room Cora Merrill laughed, not loud, just enough. Just a small bright sound aimed like a blade, and her court laughed the beat after, and Instructor Barrow turned from the board and said, "Something funny back there." And everyone said no, and Della folded the note back up along its creases, very carefully, matching each edge, as though neatness could undo it, and put it in her pocket beside the gauge, and looked out the window at the dust. I understood, watching that. Something my people take 300 years to learn and humans seem to learn by 12. There is more than one kind of enemy, and the one that comes down out of the black in a clawed cutter is not, in the end, the one that is hardest to survive. The cutter wants your ore. It has no opinion of you. It will kill you without ever once making you feel small. The note wanted something worse. The note wanted her to agree that she was nothing, and it had been delivered by children in a warm room under a shield dome with a laugh. I have fought exactly once in my life, and I will tell you about it, but not yet. I want you to sit in that room a while longer, the way I had to. I want you to feel how long a bad afternoon is. It went on for weeks. I will not narrate every cut, because cruelty is boring in the specifics even when it is devastating in the sum, and because I do not want to teach anyone the shapes of it. But I will tell you the pattern, because the pattern is the thing. Cora never touched her. That is important. Cora understood, the way clever, cruel people do, that a bruise is evidence and a word is not. She worked in the space that leaves no mark. Della's jacket would go missing from its hook and reappear stuffed behind the waste unit, damp, smelling of the drains. A drawing left on a desk would be found later with something added to it in another hand, something small and obscene, so that Della's own careful engines became things she was ashamed of. A whisper campaign, patient and total, so that the story of Della's mother, the true story, the brave one, got slowly bent into something you could snicker at. Did you hear she just drove into them? Wasn't even a plan, just panicked and crashed. A lie. A vicious, targeted lie, aimed not at Della but at the one thing Della had left, which was the meaning of what her mother did. And Della took it. That was the part I could not bear. She took all of it in that same water-flat stillness, and she came back every single day, and she sat by the window, and she drew her engines, and she gripped the gauge in her pocket, and she said nothing to anyone. I told myself it was not my place. We are guests here, we Vesson. We do not intervene in the disputes of the species we live among. It is a rule. It is a good rule. It has kept us alive and unhated across a great many worlds. I told myself she was managing. She was not managing. She was drowning very slowly in a warm room in front of everyone, and everyone had decided it was not their business, including me, the one who could see it clearest because I had nothing to do but sit in the back and watch. The thing that changed me was small. Of course it was small. The important things always come in through the smallest door. One afternoon, near the end of the day, the Dulari girl, the mechanic's daughter, the one who never spoke above a whisper, her name was Sixa, dropped her tools. She had a whole roll of them, delicate atmosphere calibration tools, her father's, that she'd brought to show me for a lesson. The roll came open on the floor, and the tools scattered under the desks, and Sixa made a sound of pure quiet despair, because those tools were her family's living, and some of them were fragile, and one had already rolled toward the doorway where the older students would come stampeding through in about 4 seconds when the bell went. And Della Voss got up. She was out of her seat before I understood what was happening. She was down on the floor. She scooped Sixa's tools out of the path of the door with 2 quick sweeps of her arm, and she put her own body between the fragile roll and the coming stampede. And when the bell went and the older students crashed through, she did not flinch at the noise, she who flinched at laughter. She just crouched there over another child's tools like something built to shield, and let them break against her, and did not let them break anything else. When it was over, she gathered the tools up and rolled them back into their cloth and handed them to Sixa without a word, and Sixa whispered something, and Della gave her the smallest ghost of a nod, and went back to her seat and picked up her stylus. I sat very still for a long time after that, because I finally understood what I had been looking at for weeks and calling broken. She was not broken. She was holding herself together with the last of what she had, spending every gram of her strength just to keep sitting in that room, and even then, even scraped down to the bone, when a smaller creature needed shielding, she had gotten up without thought and put her own body in the way of the harm. That is not what a broken thing does. A broken thing protects itself. Only a whole thing, a thing with something left, protects someone else first. I had been arriving late again. She was the strongest person in that building. She had always been. The strength just did not look the way I had been taught strength looks. And I decided sitting there that I was done watching. I want to tell you about the day it broke open, but first I have to tell you about the drill, because the drill is where it happened, and to understand the drill you have to understand the dome. I told you the shield dome hums. I told you it hums the color of a bruise about to heal. What I did not tell you is that it is old, and that Pharaoh is poor, and that the emitters that hold it up were installed by the first colonists 40 years ago and have been patched more times than anyone can count. Every settlement under a dome runs breach drills. When the dome fails, and on a frontier world it is when, never if you have between 90 seconds and 3 minutes before the outside air, which on Marrow's hold is thin and cold, and full of the same dust that gets into everything, comes pouring in. 90 seconds to get every child into a sealed shelter. The drills are constant. They are so constant that they had become a joke. a thing to groan at, a reason to file slowly out of class with your eyes rolling, especially if you were 17 and clever and untouched by anything real like Cora Merrill. I want to be fair even now, even to her. I do not think Cora understood before that day what a real breach was. How could she? She had grown up under the dome. To her it was ceiling. It was sky. It had always held. The drill that day was scheduled. Everyone knew it was coming. The klaxon sounded, a specific rising three-note wail that I can still hear if I let myself. And Instructor Barrow said, wearily, "All right, breach drill, everyone up. You know the way." And the room groaned and rose and began the slow shuffle toward the shelter corridor. And Cora said something to her court about how at least it got them out of orbital mechanics. And someone laughed the beat after. And Della got up from the window and moved with the crowd, quiet apart. And I filed out at the back like a good, integrated guest. And halfway down the shelter corridor, the drill stopped being a drill. The klaxon changed. It went from the rising three-note wail to a single flat scream, and every human in that corridor went rigid at once, because they knew that sound the way I knew the change in the dome's hum at night, knew it in the body below thought, and it meant the thing the drills were for was happening now, for real, and no one had planned it, and no one was ready. The dome was failing. I felt it before I heard the confirmation. There is a pressure that comes into your inner ears when a shield lets go, a wrongness, a suck. The lights in the corridor stuttered, and through the long window that ran the top of the corridor wall I saw it. I saw the dome, out over the settlement, flicker. The bruise-colored light of it rippled like water struck by a stone, and one whole panel of it, off toward the ridge side, went dark. A hole in the sky. And then everyone was screaming. Here is a true thing about a crowd of frightened children, and I say it without judgment because it is not a fault, it is just what bodies do. They become a single stupid animal. 100 small survival instincts firing at once, uncoordinated, each one making the others worse. They surged forward toward the shelter doors and jammed. They pushed. Someone fell and someone else went over them. The clever ones and the strong ones were no better than the weak. Cora Merrill, I saw, was shoving, her clean face gone white and open, all her cleverness burned off in an instant, screaming like the rest. Instructor Barrow was trying to get to the shelter override and could not move against the crush. The corridor was long. The shelter doors were narrow, built for orderly drill lines, not for panic. And the cold was already coming, I could feel it. A thin knife of marrows holds real air sliding down the corridor from the breech section. And I did the fast arithmetic my people are good at, and the arithmetic said, not everyone in this corridor is going to make it through those doors in time. And in the middle of that, in the exact eye of that screaming animal crowd, one person was still. You already know who. Della Vos stood in the corridor with the panic breaking around her like water around a post, and her eyes were flat and clear. And I watched something move behind them that I had seen only once before, in the recovered logs of the convoy, in the last frame before the second hauler turned toward the cutter. She had been here before, not this corridor, but here. This exact place where the world has stopped being safe and there is no adult coming and the only question left is what you do with the seconds you have. The rest of them had never been here. It was breaking them. It did not break her because she was already broken in this specific way, and a thing that has already been through the fire does not fear the fire. She had paid this price once. She knew what it cost, and she knew it was payable. She moved. I will tell you exactly what she did, because I have gone over it many times, and because I want it recorded somewhere that a Vesson saw it and understood it. She did not run for the doors. That is the first thing. Every instinct in that corridor said doors, and she ignored every one of them, because she had already done the arithmetic I had done, faster than I had done it, and she knew the doors were the problem, not the answer. She went to the fallen ones first. There were 3 on the floor, gone down in the crush, about to be trampled. She hauled the first up by the collar with her good arm. her other still not fully healed, and I saw it cost her, saw the pain go across her face and get shoved aside like everything else got shoved aside, and she put the child on their feet and she shouted. I had never heard her voice raised. In all those weeks I had never once heard Della Voss speak above the level of the room. Now she filled the corridor with it, and it was not a scream. It was a command, flat and hard and absolutely certain, the voice of someone who has been in the 11 minutes and come out the other side. Stop pushing, you're killing each other, stop. And this is the part I still do not fully understand about your species, the part that makes me afraid of you and glad of you in the same breath. They listened. Not all at once, but the ones nearest her heard a voice that was not afraid, in a place where every other voice was afraid, and it was like a stone dropped into the churning water, and the churn slowed around it. She grabbed the next fallen child up. She got the third. She turned to the doors, and she did the thing that no one in the panic could do because the panic had eaten their minds, the thing that only someone standing outside the panic could do. She organized them. 2 lines, her arm slashing the air showing them. 2 lines through together, Geo next, Geo next. And the narrow doors that had been jammed solid with a screaming knot of children began, under the pressure of one flat certain voice, to flow. 2 by 2. The way the drills had always taught and the panic had always forgotten. She stood beside the door and she fed them through it, 2 by 2, her good hand on shoulders, pushing, steadying, go next, go, and the cold was pouring down the corridor now, and the flat klaxon was screaming, and the emergency seals were counting down somewhere, and she did not move from that door. She got them all through, every one. And here is the thing. Here is the thing I came all this way in this telling to give you. The last one still in the corridor, the very last, frozen against the wall with her clean clothes and her white open face and nothing left of her cleverness or her court, was Cora Merrill. Cora who had made those weeks a slow drowning. Cora who had written the note. Cora who had bent the true story of Della's mother into something to snicker at. Cora who by every arithmetic of grievance had earned whatever the next 30 seconds held. She had gone down in the crush and been left. Her own court had climbed over her to reach the doors. She was on the floor by the wall with the cold coming and she could not get up, and she looked at the closing gap of the shelter door, and then she looked, because there was no one else left to look at, she looked at Della Voss. And Della looked back at her. I was still in the corridor. I confess it, I had frozen too, in the way even my calm species can freeze, and I was 3 strides from the door and I could have gone through and I did not, because I could not look away from what was about to happen between those 2 girls. I thought Della would leave her. I want to be honest with you about the ugliness in my own mind. In that half-second I thought, let her. After everything. Let her go through the door and let the enemy she never fought take the enemy she never earned. That was the thought in me, and it was a small thought, and it was a Vesson thought, 300 years of quiet grievance-keeping in it, and I am not proud of it. Della crossed the corridor. She did not hesitate. She crossed the freezing corridor with the sky broken open over the settlement and the seals counting down, and she took Cora Merrill, the author of her Every Bad Afternoon, by the collar with her good arm, and she hauled her up off the floor, and she said something to her. I was close enough this time, I heard it. She did not say you're welcome. She did not say now we're even. She did not say any of the things I would have needed to say, that my whole species would have needed to say, to make the sum come out right. She looked Cora Merrill in her white frightened face, and she said, in that same flat certain voice, already turning her toward the door, "Move your feet. I'm not carrying you." And she shoved her through the sheltered door, and came through behind her, last of all, and the seals slammed shut a breath after her heel cleared them, and the flat scream of the klaxon cut off into the deep silence of a sealed shelter, and outside in the corridor the real air of Marrow's hold came pouring cold and thin into a space that no longer held anyone at all. We were in that shelter for 4 hours, while the settlement's engineers scrambled crews up the dome struts to seal the breach and repressurize. 4 hours is a long time in a small sealed room with 100 children who have just learned, all at once, that the sky can break. Some of them cried. Some of them went very quiet. A few, the youngest, fell asleep, the way small ones do when the body decides it has had enough and simply switches off. Cora Merrill sat against the far wall with her knees pulled up. Her court did not gather to her. They stayed away, a little, as if she carried something now that they didn't want to catch, and I understood, watching, that the crown had shifted in that corridor, and everyone in the room had felt it move even if none of them could have said so. She had been carried by no one. She had been climbed over by her own. And she had been shoved through the last closing door by the girl she had spent weeks trying to convince the world was nothing. Della sat by the shelter's one small viewport. Of course she did. Wherever there was a window, that is where she went. Her arm was hurting. I could see it now that the certainty had drained out of her and left just the girl again. The command voice was gone. The flat, clear thing behind her eyes was gone. She had spent it all in the corridor, and now she was just tired and hurting and 16, and her hand was in her jacket pocket, closed around the gauge, and she was looking out the little viewport at the dead, cold dark where the sky used to be. I went and sat beside her. It took me a while. My knees do not fold right for human furniture, and there was not much room. She did not look at me, but she did not move away either, which for Della was a great deal. I did not know what to say. My people are not good at this. We arrive late to comfort too. So I said the only true thing I had, which was small and which I have never regretted. I said, that is the second time. She looked at me then, just a flick of her eyes. The second time you saved everyone, I said, in the convoy, and now. Something crossed her face. I did not have the human skill to name it then. I think now it was the thing that happens when a person who has been very alone with something discovers that one other person saw it clearly. My mom saved everyone, she said. Her voice was rough from the shouting. It was the most words she had said to anyone in the school in all those weeks. Not me. In the convoy, it was my mom. Yes, I said, because it was true and she deserved the truth. Your mother saved you all, and today you did what she did. You saw the thing no one else could bear to see, and you did what it needed, and you did not leave anyone behind. I paused the way my people pause, even the one who earned leaving. Her hand tightened on the gauge in her pocket. For a moment I thought I had said the wrong thing, reached into a place I had no right to. Then she said, very low, looking back out the viewport at the broken dark. She didn't earn it. Nobody earns it. She stopped, started again. That's the whole thing. That's the thing everybody gets wrong. You don't leave people. It's not about whether they earned staying. It's about whether you're the kind of person who leaves. I have lived a long time by human measure. I have crossed between worlds. I have sat in the great quiet libraries of my people, where the wisdom of 3,000 years is kept. And I am telling you that a 16-year-old human girl, exhausted and hurting in a sealed shelter under a broken sky, with a dead machine held tight in her pocket like a hand she could no longer hold, said a truer thing about what it means to be a good person than anything I had found in 3,000 years of Vessan quiet. It's not about whether they earned staying. It's about whether you're the kind of person who leaves. I did not answer her. I did not have an answer worthy of it. I just sat beside her, my knees folded wrong, and looked out the little viewport with her at the place where the sky had broken, and waited, the way she had taught me to wait, for the light to come back. They repaired the dome. Of course they did. Pharaoh is poor, but it is stubborn, and the engineers went up the struts in the cold and the thin air with their tethers and their torches, and they sealed the breach panel by panel. And by the time they let us out of the shelter, the hum was back. The bruise-colored light was back, holding up the false sky, and the children walked home under it as though it had never faltered. But it had faltered, and everyone had felt it, and nothing after was quite the same in the small ways that matter. Cora Merrill did not come back to school for 4 days. When she did, she was quieter. Her court had thinned. Some of them had climbed over her in the corridor, and you cannot unknow a thing like that about the people you thought were yours. She did not look at Della. She could not, I think. There is a specific kind of shame that has nowhere to go, that just sits in a person, and I believe Cora carried it a long time. I do not know if she ever became better. I would like to tell you she did, that the corridor changed her, that cruelty met its match and repented. But I promised you a true story, and the truth is I do not know. Some people are changed by the thing that breaks them open. Some just close back up around a harder core. I lost track of Cora Merrill. I hope, without much evidence, that she is kind now. Hope is cheap and I can afford it. The note stopped, that much I know. The whispers stopped. Not because anyone decreed it, but because you cannot make a settlement snicker at a girl they all watched stand in a breached corridor and feed 100 children 2 by 2 through a closing door. The true story of Della's mother came back, straightened, unbent, and settled into the place it belonged. And alongside it a new story settled in beside it, the story of the daughter, and the two of them held each other up the way true stories do. Della went back to sitting by the window. She went back to drawing engines in the margins, cut open so you could see the parts. But her hand did not shake anymore. I noticed it about a week after. I was in the back, being seen, being integrated, and I looked over at the window seat and she was drawing, and her line was clean and steady and sure, and I understood that some knot in her had loosened. Not because the war had left her. It will never leave her. She will hear that flat klaxon in her sleep for the rest of her life, and she will grip a dead gauge in her pocket at the sound of a certain kind of laughter until she is very old. That does not go away. I have learned that much about your species. You do not heal the way we heal. You do not close over your wounds. You carry them open forever, and you keep walking anyway, and you reach down to pull up the fallen ones on your way, and that terrible, magnificent, impossible thing is the whole of what you are. The knot loosened because for the first time since the convoy, someone had seen her clearly, and she had let them, and she was no longer entirely alone inside the thing she carried. That someone was me, a slow gray guest who arrives late to everything, who nearly did nothing, who almost let the rule about not intervening keep him sitting quiet in the back while a whole and unbreakable person drowned in a warm room. I did so little. I sat beside her. I said that is the second time. That is all I did. Sometimes that is all there is to do. Sometimes the light that saves someone is just one other person, refusing to look away. I have thought since about the title the settlement gave the whole affair, half joking, the way humans joke about the things that frighten them most. She survived an alien skirmish, they said, and then she came back and faced something worse. She faced school. They meant it as a joke. It is not a joke. It is the truest thing they ever said, and they said it laughing. Because the cutter that came down out of the black wanted only her ore. It had no opinion of her. It would have killed her body and left herself entirely intact, the way a storm or a rockfall or any blind and impersonal force does. That is not the enemy that nearly destroyed Della Voss. The enemy that nearly destroyed her was the folded note, the bent story, the laugh aimed like a blade in a warm, safe room by people who had never faced anything real, and so had learned to make their own small wars out of whatever soft place they could find in another person. That enemy does not want your ore. That enemy wants yourself. It wants you to fold up small along your own creases and agree that you are nothing. And it does not come at you out of the black where you can see it and name it and drive 40 tons of steel into its heart. It comes at you across a classroom, hand to hand, with a smile. Della Voss survived both. She survived the skirmish because her mother was brave enough to trade everything for 11 minutes. And she survived school, the note, the whispers, the drowning weeks, because when the sky finally broke open and offered her the perfect chance to become small and afraid like everyone else, she chose instead to become the thing her mother had been. She stood in the eye of the panic, and she did not leave a single soul behind. not even the one who had earned leaving, because she was the kind of person who does not leave. I am Vesson. We are old and we are quiet and we arrive late to almost everything. But I arrived in the end to this one true understanding, and I hold it now the way she holds that gauge. The galaxy is full of things that can take your life. There is only one kind of creature I have ever met that can look the thing that wants to take your soul right in its face, in a broken corridor, with the cold coming in, and answer it in a flat, steady voice that does not shake. And say, "Move your feet, I'm not carrying you." And then carry them anyway, all the way through the door. That is a human. That is what you are. I am glad, across all the cold light years I have crossed, that I lived long enough to sit in the back of one dusty frontier classroom and be arriving, late as always, exactly in time to see it.